Hey, this is Anthony Davis with Shapeshift Wellness, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the idea of tensegrity, and we're using an example of a biceps curl to try and explore this idea a little bit. Specifically, I hope to accomplish a little bit of a comparison of classical mechanics, which involves levers and pulleys that sort of looks at the body like it's a machine, versus the biotensegrity model, which says, no, there are no joints, there are no levers. It's a tensegrity architecture. And I hope to have some peace between these two opposing camps because they both have a lot to offer us. So let's get to it. Hey, real quick, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, share this with your anatomy-loving friends, and stick around for the whole video so we can really understand some of the nuance of this together. And I'll give you some tips for your yoga practice at the end. So let's start off by looking at a comparison of tensegrity versus classical mechanics. If you've never seen what a tensegrity structure looks like, this right here is a simple example of a tensegrity structure. Essentially, what you have is bars that create local points of compression. So for example, right here, 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 here. These are all points of compression that are they're compressing the string that is holding them in place. And the string is creating tension around the system, which holds the compressive elements of the bars in place. So you could kind of think about it like, let's say blowing up a balloon would be an example. If you blow up a balloon, there's air pressure from the inside of the balloon and it's pushing out in every single direction. And then there's tension created by the elastic rubber sort of nature of this stretchy material of the balloon. And that allows for this balance of compression and tension that allows the balloon to stay sort of in that harmonious. And if you add too much compression, the balloon pops. But if you don't add enough compression, or if there's too much tension in the rubber material, then you can't blow the balloon up at all. So you need appropriate amounts of both forces. In contrast, you have a classical joint here. So on the right, we have just a ball and socket joint that is a machine that you would see in any kind of biomechanics textbook, where you have a ball in a socket and it has predictable behaviors because the ball is fixed inside of a socket. And when the two bars meet each other, they form a joint and they move predictably around an axis. And then you have all these levers and basically machines and the physics of machines applies to this model. Now, commonly, currently, these two models are diametrically opposed. We are looking at them as though one or the other exists, but not both. I think that's bullshit. Both of these are true. If you zoom in enough, you see that our cells are literally made of a tensegrity structure, but our joints do kind of form, well, joints, and therefore they do form sort of an axis of rotation, and then you can start to say, oh, well, then the way that muscles cross joints can form pulleys and levers, but let's look at that in a moment. First, I want to get to the main point of this video, which is isolation is impossible. So the main point here, regardless of all the physics and the tensegrity versus classic mechanics and all of that, which I need to make a totally separate video on because it's a complex topic and it needs to be broken down piece by piece. The point of this video is to say that isolation is impossible, okay? So tensegrity is a really specific look, but we've been talking about how every part of your body is connected through movement. And if you do one thing, if you do a bicep curl, which is supposed to be an isolation exercise, it just trains your bicep. Well, that's not true at all. And we've known this for at least 150 years or so, because tensegrity is a buzzword now, but people have been talking about kinetic chains, regional interdependence, and other names for essentially how joint by joint theory, how one area of the body is connected to the next area, to the next area, to the next area, to the next area. We've been talking about this for a long time. So in the biceps curl example, yeah, biceps curl in, a strength and conditioning program is thought of like an isolation exercise, like, oh, I'm just training my biceps. But is that true? Well, okay, so we've got an asymmetrical weight. So we've got a weight over here on one side of the body. Well, in order to not literally fall in this direction, these muscles over here have to contract in order to make it so you don't lean in that direction. So already we see that, well, in order to just hold the weight in one hand, the other side of your body has to work. And then you'll see that the shoulder muscles have to stabilize in order to keep the arm, the elbow at your side and keep it from swaying. The muscles on the back here need to hold the scapula, your shoulder blade, in place because the weight from the biceps would pull forward and roll your shoulder forward. And then those muscles, where do they connect? They connect down your spine. So those are going to pull on your spine, which means that muscles that connect to your pelvis need to stabilize and anchor on it in order to keep your pelvis from moving. And then those muscles, if they're keeping your pelvis from moving, then, well, the pelvis can't be an anchor on its own because it connects to your femur, your leg bones. So then your leg muscles on both sides of your legs need to stabilize the pelvis to your leg, which, well, it stabilizes to your lower leg, and then that stabilizes into the floor. So I'm showing you, you don't need to memorize all these patterns, but the point is that in order to just hold a weight in your hand, your entire body, from your arm to your shoulder to your spine to your hips to your knees to your toes, everything is working in order to just hold something stationary without moving. That's actually a really complex kinetic chain, right? So I think that that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind, is that our whole body is working no matter what we do. So isolation is impossible. This is actually really cool for yoga people because I think yoga people get off on the idea that everything's like connected, man. Well, it is. It really is actually connected in your body. So I think that's cool. So let's zoom in a little bit here and look at how the biceps pulls on the shoulder blade. So the biceps is a muscle and it connects to your lower arm, your forearm, but it also connects to your shoulder somewhere, right? Well, it doesn't connect to your arm bone, your humerus, which would be this little bone that's kind of sticking out there. So it does not actually connect to your humerus. Interestingly, it crosses that joint and it actually connects here to your scapula. So I'm going to just outline your scapula. So your scapula is right there. And the biceps connects to that. It connects to what's called your coracoid process. So we're zooming in here and you see that right here, it connects to that coracoid process. It also has another head to it that connects to just above the glenoid fossa. But we're going to focus on the coracoid process because it's more interesting for our purposes here. So here we are, we have a person holding a weight, and that weight, what it's doing is your biceps muscle and lots of other muscles, but we're just pretending like we're, only the biceps is working right now, even though that's not true. Lots of other muscles are working. But the biceps muscle is being pulled by the weight in this direction. Well, in order for it to resist that and hold the weight in place, it has to anchor on something. right? Like if I have my friend who's about to fall off a cliff, I have to reach out with my hand and grab their hand, and I'm holding them and I'm pulling them. But in order for me not to get pulled over the cliff, I have to take my other hand and reach behind me and grab a pole or something, or grab a fence or something like that. So I'm holding on to my friend, but I also have to hold on to the fence so that I don't go with them. So in the same way, the biceps is holding on to the coracoid process and also the supraglenoid tubercle, but ignore that for now. So either way, both of these, so it's going to pull on this right here. So it's pulling that anchor point along with it. Well, that means that, well, it's really me. I'm holding on to my friend, and then I reach back and there's no pull. There's actually just another person. So I grab onto their arm. Well, okay, so now we're going to have three of us go over a cliff. Okay, so that third person, now they need to hold on to something. So what does the scapula hold on to? Well, if it does nothing, then the entire scapula is going to go down like this. We can't have that. And if it were to do that, it would rotate around an axis. So we can see right here that here's an axis of rotation, and we can have here's the scapula right here. We can have it tilt forward or back. So we can have it tilt like this, or we could have it tilt back. So I'll zoom in here just to show you what those would look like. So here's one, and then we have or it can tilt back, right? So here it would be it rotated forward, or here it rotated backwards. Cool? So we can have one of those two situations because it's sort of rotating over the joint, which is right here. So let's get rid of some of these things in the way. And right here is the joint. And so it's going to remain kind of fixed by that joint because of the way the ball in the socket fits. Even though it's not really a ball and socket joint, it is a ball and socket joint, classically speaking, but really it's kind of a bar inside of a fluid-filled sac where it's pushing against the tensile fabric of your joint capsule. So it's kind of a tensegrity structure. This is complicated, I get it, but let's move on and talk about the main thing, like why does this actually matter to you? So here we go. This is just a simple representation. Here's the coracoid process. The weight pulls down. If you did nothing, then the whole scapula would rotate around like this. But we have a counterweight. We have somebody's pulling from the other side. So we have the lats, the traps, the serratus, and the other muscles. And these muscles are essentially anchoring the scapula to your back so that it doesn't go with it. So this is your third friend over here. And so you're holding onto your friend. They're falling off a cliff. You try to reach back, you grab your other friend's hand, and now we got to deal with that third friend. And what are they doing? So here we go. We've got essentially, one part of the system is grabbing and pulling this way. Then your muscles on your back are grabbing onto the backside of your scapula and anchoring them down. But what are they anchoring to? Well, they're anchoring to your hips. So here we are, you zoom in, you're looking at the backside of the body, and you see that the highlighted muscles here, well, they're connecting to your pelvis. Those are bones. And so those bones, if they're going to serve as an anchor, so now I'm holding onto my friend, they're falling off a cliff, I reach back to grab my other friend's hand, that friend, who is the traps right here, and the latissimus, reaches back to grab the pelvis, that's a fourth friend, and then your fourth friend needs to not move, so they reach back, that's your hamstrings, and they try to grab your knee, across your knee joint, that's a fifth friend. So you've got all these people trying to grab your friend, and you're all trying to hold on to each other. Some of you are kind of falling off the cliff. And eventually, right here, you see the whole sort of kinetic chain. And this isn't even the whole picture because this is just one side of the body. In truth, You have some friends here and the wind is blowing and I'm being pulled backwards and forward, then I'm being pulled off the cliff. And so all my friends, so some friends have to go off in this direction so I don't, go flying back this way. And some friends have to stop me this way. So we've got like this huge complex networks of friends and we're all falling off a cliff. And we're all trying to hold on to each other and stop this thing from happening. So this is this big, messy situation of just trying to hold a heavy object in your hand. It should be so simple, but it's not. So I know this is a mess. I realize that. If you've made it to the end of this video, I don't know why. I don't know why you didn't hang up on me earlier. You please do give me a like, unless you're just watching this like for cringe value. But as a special bonus to you for sticking around for however many minutes of me talking about people falling off a cliff, and you're sitting there wondering how this has anything to do with movement, let's go back to the tensegrity versus the ball and socket joint, and just quickly say why it's both. It's both because if you had a tensegrity structure, you can see there are local points of compression here and here and here, and they're pushing out on the stretchy stuff. Okay, so you've got a hard thing and it's pushing out on some stretchy stuff. That's basically tensegrity. Okay, versus two really hard things being permanently joined and then they move within themselves. Okay, that's kind of classical mechanics. Well, it's both, because you've got here's your humerus, this is your upper arm bone, and then here's your scapula with the glenoid fossa. Okay, so here's the joint. But then around that, what you have is a joint capsule. So you've got all this connective tissue. And then inside that, you've got basically fluid. So think of these as like little water molecules. It's actually a different fluid, but it doesn't matter. It's fluid. Let's just call it water. And it's thicker than water though. Anyway, so in here, what you'd see is that the forces are such that the bones don't really directly connect. It's inside a fluid bag. So you could see that this bone could go up this way, for example, and it would stretch out the connective tissue here, right? And so that would be like your tensegrity structure, where you've got a hard thing that's pushing into some stretchy stuff. But then it gets limited though. So that's true, that's a tensegrity structure. But then you look at it and essentially this whole thing acts like a joint. It's a tensegrity structure, but it's still kind of fixed in place. And so the humerus itself still moves, like if you're trying to reach over your head, for example, the humerus still moves so that it's here and then it moves into this new position. And it still remains kind of fixed around this axis right here. So in that way, it moves like classic mechanics. Sorry for the tangent. Somebody was giving me a hard time about this, which I appreciate, by the way, if you're watching. I appreciate being forced to critically think about these things. But here's why it's both. It's not one or the other. So for yoga, why this matters is because it's important to consider that every single pose involves your entire body. Period. So bring attention to your entire body. Cue for students to be aware of their entire body when they're moving, even if they're doing something that seems like sort of an isolation exercise. And at the same time, it's still important to study classical mechanics, because levers and pulleys do exist in the human body. They're not perfect levers. It's not a perfect machine, but we can predict patterns and we can modify exercises. We can modify where we place our hands in a chaturanga, where we place our feet in a squat, where we place our feet in a lunge, where we put our knees in a lunge. We can do these things to make the exercise harder or easier for an individual and make it more customized. So classical physics informs us on that, and tensegrity informs us on how we are connected from head to toe. They're both important. They're both applicable. They're both practically useful in yoga. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, share this with your friends, and I will see you in the next episode.